Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Reid, and this is Hey Bay City.
So your path to Reid Recording Studio actually began in the early 1990s with a pop band, a power pop band called the Haskells. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about the Haskells.
Okay, so this is, I was in high school. I didn't have much of a direction in high school, let's just say that.
Well, let's say that nobody really has that much direction in high school. You're not behind the curve there.
2.3 GPA, just barely doing enough to get by. But I was a avid golfer back then, so I was pretty solid at that. So I really didn't have many options getting out of high school. So I went to Ferris State for pro golf management.
Oh, really?
For a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is pro golf management?
It's basically it's a glorified marketing degree in how to run a pro shop, which you could just, Anyway, so during that time, my cousin Danny had a band called Acoustic Fields. They were he was the drummer in that band, and they were an original band from this area. And at that time, there were 3 or 4 original bands in the area. So I loved those guys. I would follow them around. I'd go watch them. I'd kind of run sound for them. And eventually, when I did leave Ferris, or I said I was done with that, I had $150 left of student loan money, and I bought a guitar. So that's when I kind of started. And then about 3 years later, I wanted to do this band thing, and I was a big Weezer fan, and I thought that they kind of had a cool thing of they sounded modern, but they had the old school Beatle, Beach Boy kind of thing going on.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where I always lived. Because I just loved all that stuff. I loved, I don't know if Fountains of Wayne was around at that time. I think they were. That first record was out. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff that spoke to me. So I started the Haskells with my brother. He learned how to play bass. We were just writing songs. We recruited our friend Todd. Yeah, and that was I would say later 90s, and then, but what that did, that's almost kind of cool that you brought that up, because that is really the infancy of Reid Recording. Because we were recording our own demos, we were recording our own records on ADATs and stuff like that. It was always cheaper to do it yourself, buy the gear and do it yourself. So I kind of just learned how to do it by having my own band and wanting to put out records. So, but then you also, when you're doing original music, you usually play one set. So you're on a bill with 2 or 3 other bands. So that's your networking right there. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I still work with from that era of meeting friends and stuff across the state. Yeah, so that was it. And that kind of got me into the original music scene. That got me into songwriting. That got me into recording, all of it.
Did the recording bug hit you right away? Were you like, oh, this is rad, I love this production side of it? Or was it something that just kind of evolved over time?
Well, I didn't really understand it completely yet, but we did a record. The Haskells did one record with Brendan Benson in Detroit, and Brendan later became the other guy in the Raconteurs with Jack White. Okay, Brendan was always a hero of mine. He put out a record in '96 on Virgin. I was one of 5,000 people who bought it. Mm-hmm. And so some friends told us he had a studio in his home in Detroit, and he had tape machines, vintage microphones, cool guitars. And then I was like, oh, this is how you make records. I was just okay, you play your part, you play live, and that's it. Mm-hmm. He's doing overdubs. We're trying weird spacey sounds, and that's when the hooks got me. I was working with Brendan. Yep.
Why?
So we get done with that record, and it's on. You know what I mean? It's okay, what do I need to do to get better at this? What do I need to do to... What gear do I need? I can't afford a tape machine right now, but eventually I got one. Yeah. And so, it was just, and this is maybe when digital was just starting to be a recording thing. So I'm learning on tape. Yeah. And I'm learning, it's you got to play your stuff to get it down.
It's wild that you say that, because you think of late 1990s, of course everybody's using Pro Tools. Of course everybody, but that's not really true. That's really kind of the beginning of the transition from you have to go to a recording studio because that's where all the gear is, or you're cobbling things together in your basement. Digital recording wasn't really a thing.
No, not at all. And honestly, it was just starting to be a thing, but it was still super expensive and still in its infancy. So you have it wasn't ready for the home market yet. It was not affordable. It was cheaper to go buy an 8-track half-inch machine. You know what I mean? So and then in the early 2000s is when, it's like the Pro Tools started making smaller interfaces for home recordists.
Yeah.
So that's when I got into that.
Yeah. You mentioned Weezer earlier. What do you think about new Weezer versus old Weezer?
Okay, we're going to go there.
We're going to go there.
Well, I'm kind of, first 2 records are brilliant. I mean, Pinkerton and the Blue Album. I like a lot of what they're doing. They did the White Album like a few years ago. I really loved that one. So I am, at this point, it's like a 1 out of every 2 or 3 records. But those early ones, even like the first 5, Maladroit, all those, I love all those.
What do you think from working with musicians? What do you think about a shift in sound? Because like we're thinking early Weezer, it's also partially nostalgic. Like
of course,
I grew up with them. Like a little rock out, and then all of a sudden they do something different, unexpected, like something that is, of course, an evolution, but very much different than what you expect. What do you think about that
I think that's super important, and it's something that every artist should and has to do. So it might not be for me, but it's like, look at David Bowie's arc of his records. Like every record's different, and some of them hit you, some of them don't. But I think it's great that they do that. They have to do that. Otherwise, it's just, pandering to the Blue Album fan base.
Yeah, and you kind of lose that a little bit not being the musician. Like I've got some friends that tour, and I love their early stuff. Oh my gosh. I just swoon over all of these songs, and then they started working with a new producer, and they really went a different direction. And no offense to them, I don't really listen to that, and it's not my jam. But I try to think about this idea of, like, if it was me, would I want to be playing that song from 15 years ago every single night, even if it does make people swoon? Like, I've got to do something to keep myself in it, keep engaged as an artist, all of those things, even if it might alienate some people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You have to, if you're playing it, you have to sprinkle in some new creative outlets to make yourself kind of still want to keep going. Otherwise, but some people are, there are some bands that just, they know the formula, they stick with it, and they just want to make their fans happy and go for it. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with bands just jumping genres and going nuts. I mean, look at Radiohead, for crying out loud.
Yep.
Okay, let's make a alternative rock album. Okay, let's make the space rock record. Okay, let's throw away our guitars. It's like they didn't lose many people.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's bold, but I think for people that want careers, even looking at like the pop stars like Billie Eilish, I mean, she constantly does different things each time.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. And it's like that's what we're all looking for. And I try to stay open-minded with it too. If I love something they've already done, I try to approach it like, okay, I know this is going to be different. Let's listen to it and see what it is,
I think about the Black Keys. They in that regard, like the early stuff, it's swampy and dirty. And like just thinking like Chulahoma is just like that, the anthems there. And then Dan comes out with like something like El Camino and some of the other stuff. And at first I was like, this is not the Black Keys that I love.
Right.
Dan, this is not the Black Keys that I love. But then you listen to it more and you start to, I don't want to say disassociate from what you expect to what you have, but you see the direction and you're like, okay, I can dig this.
Yeah.
I can dig this for what it is. It is not what I remember, but I dig this.
Yeah, and I think it's important for careers. You have to. You have to.
Yeah. So you were talking about gear earlier and digital versus analog. Are you still using both digital and analog in your recording?
Kind of. Yeah, I'm definitely a hybrid person. So on the way in to the computer, it's running through a lot of outboard gear, like, hand-wired mic preamps, tube compressors, that kind of thing. So The main setback for digital has always been what's called the converter, the analog to digital converter, because the converter has to switch the analog signal to digital to get to the computer. Mm-hmm. Those have gotten so much better over the past 10 years, like to where you can't hear the difference. So at this point, it's just my workflow. I'm just used to the analog workflow, so I still kind of like to get everything down the way I want it to sound on the way into Pro Tools, so I don't have to like. There's this thing that people say called "fix it in the mix," where you just record it and you don't worry about it, and you mix it later.
Yeah, in video, it's called "fix it in post."
Right. Yeah. So it's like I don't like to do that. I kind of like to get the sound we want for the record. We put it down into Pro Tools the way that we want it, with all the effects and everything, and then we move on to the next bit. So I still have a 2-track mix down reel. So sometimes if like I'm done with an album and it just needs a little bit of that like super grainy, little more lo-fi thing, I'll run it through the tape machine and then back into digital. So,
are you one that feels like different gear inspires you and your work in different way? Do you think that's all voodoo made up stuff, or like where do you stand on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Gear. You're talking to one of the biggest gear nerds on the planet. So yeah, absolutely. I think that when you think about, we were talking about this earlier too, it's like the amount of audio manufacturers that exist now is like, it's got to be 6-7 times what it used to be, like even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of gear. And, with the digital world, when you get inside the computer, essentially everybody has the same access to the same tools. Okay. So my paint brushes and my canvas, I want to decide what that is on the way in. So this separates me from the other people. It's like, I want to run through this microphone preamp because it has a specific sound. That's a specific color that I love. And so you can develop your own studio identity by the gear you collect, because that becomes the sound of your studio. So yeah, absolutely. So when we're thinking about what we're doing for drums and different things, guitars, whatever, even the human voice, it's like, I have 10 options for vocals. So, or probably more, but I don't know. You have to make those creative decisions, and that's when the art side comes into play. You could easily get this done with like 2 microphones and a computer, but I want the crayon box with the 64 colors. You know what I mean? I don't want the 8.
That kind of speaks to this idea of course, you can record your own music in your own house with your own microphone or whatever it is that you're using. You can of course do that, and people do that, and they're successful at it. But one of the advantages of working with somebody to record your stuff is that they have access and experience to all these different pieces of equipment that can really bring out the sound that you want, but don't necessarily know how to get. Would that be accurate?
100% accurate. Yep. So, and especially since like at this point, when I've been doing it 17 years, a lot of the clientele, the newer clientele I get in, is because they liked a record I did. You know what I mean? So it's like, now it's just piggybacking. So it's like, yeah, I really like the way the drums sounded on this. I'm like, okay, I know how I did that. Let's do it. You know? And that's pretty cool to get to that point, so it's like, so I don't have to grind as hard to get newer clientele. They already know what I'm capable of, and when they come to me, they're coming to me for a specific reason.
When you've reached Jedi status, as it were.
Yeah. Well,
would you call yourself a producer, a recording engineer? Like, where do you fit in that?
Well, I think I'm a producer. I always wanted to be an engineer and just be the engineer, but I've learned over the years that people come to me more for the production role to help them with their music, and then the fact that I have the engineering chops and gear, that's like the bonus kind of thing. So yeah, I think I'm a producer engineer, even though I always wanted to be just an engineer.
Well, because I asked that because you're similar setup to me, where you're doing a thing, and then you end up having to do multiple things in order to pull off the thing. And so when I say producer, can you explain what a music producer is? Because I think sometimes people don't understand what their role is in the production of music?
Yeah. So I'll start with the engineer because the engineer is a little easier. Engineer is basically the person responsible for setting up the microphones, putting them where they're supposed to be, and recording the information that's being cut to tape. They're the ones EQing, adding compression, but usually under the producer's direction. And so the producer's basically like kind of the person in charge in the room. Now, I don't ever consider myself the person in charge of the room. I like to co-produce with the artist, okay? So that means we're bouncing ideas off each other, and the producer helps with the music part. So the producer helps the artist bring out their potential, maybe helps with the arrangement of the song, maybe suggests different ideas and chord progressions and stuff like that. So the producer is almost like the editor, of sorts, but on the way in, and kind of really shapes and molds the song in the performance. And then the engineer is the one in charge of documenting it.
That makes sense. Is there, you kind of talked about your approach as a producer, that it's really collaborating with the artist and bouncing ideas off, and I would assume that's how you define a good producer. How would you define a bad producer?
Oh man, I mean, I've heard stories from a lot of people, but I don't know. I mean, I think a bad producer, but there's merit to all of it. I mean, there are producer types that go in and they're just heavy-handed and say, no, you play it like this. No, you do this. No, you sing this word this way. And it can be soul-crushing to the artist, but then it could be a massive hit. I mean, take Chicago with David Foster, you're the meaning in my life, you're the cheesy Peter Cetera Chicago. If you talk to all the band members, they hated it because they're like, they took the guitars away and put keyboards in his hand. And then they had their biggest selling record in the meantime. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan of Phil Spector, and I know he was heavy-handed. I mean, I'm a fan of him as a musician, as a person. He's a gigantic turd, but he was pretty heavy-handed too. Like he
the wall of sound.
The wall of sound, yeah. So, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I think I don't know if there is a right or wrong. I think if a producer takes a band and just does what he or she wants to do, and doesn't listen to the band, that would be a bad producer in my mind. Because we're hired as a service to these people. So when your ego gets in the way of that service, then you're doing a crappy job.
Yeah, you're making it about you as a producer, not about them and their music. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
When somebody goes to Reed Recording Studio to record some music, they're actually going to your home and into your basement. Why that choice of going to a home studio model as opposed to here's my sprawling $45,000 or 45,000 square foot facility?
Okay.
Why a home studio?
Many reasons for that. So when I got into this, I didn't know I was getting into this. If long story short, I just had a couple friends kind of ask me to work on their music with them. Brett Mitchell from Midland was kind of the first, and I'm like, okay, yeah, come on over. Because he liked a record that I made, one of my own CDs that I made with my brother, the Reed Brothers record, and he's like, hey, would you consider recording me? And I'm like, yeah, of course, man, that'd be awesome. No idea, it's like, do I charge you? How does this work? That
buy me pizza, maybe?
Yeah. It's like, so it all kind of started so super innocent like that, and so it was in my home, and the whole idea of building this studio in my home in my basement was just for me to have a creative space to work on my own music, which it was plenty. You know what I mean? And then it just kind of snowballed. And I'm like, oh man, I'm get 4 days a week now. Okay, 5 days a week, And then I, at that point, I was like, okay, well, I think I can. I was playing in a cover band at the time, Jedi Mind Trip, and I was like, I think I can just do this. I kind of like this, And it just basically stayed that way. And then as time went on, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start looking for a space. I'm gonna start looking for a bigger space, and I just never found the right one. And then, I had a couple kind of swings and misses. It just never worked out. And I kind of just, nobody really cares that it's kind of small, and the sound is what's important.
Yeah.
And the comfort of the musicians is important too. And it's cozy, but everybody's comfortable. It's less intimidating for a lot of people making their first record when going into the studio,
true.
you know. So it's just like, hey, come on over to my house, let's make some music. You know, it kind of has that vibe to it, so it's a little more relaxing. And then as the tools got better and I'm able to like simulate, like, so if I want like a drum sound that sounds like it's in a gigantic studio, there are tools now that I can do that. There weren't tools like that before. So I wanted
to be in the space to create the space sound.
Correct. Yeah. So now that the tools are there, it's like, okay, well, why would I want to? I can make it sound like it was in Ocean Way in Los Angeles, and it's crazy. So,
wild. Do you run into any like pandemic? Everybody shifted to working from home, and now that conversation of like, do we have to be in person? Can we work remote? And a lot of folks ran into not being able to really separate home and work very well. It's now all of a sudden you're surrounded by everything in your life that can distract you from what you want to do. Do you run into that at all, or is it you've got your flow dialed in? And
oh yeah, so my wife shifted to homework, so she works upstairs, I work downstairs.
Oh really?
Yeah. So it's
little co-working space at home.
It's different. It's different. Yeah, it's a little trickier, but we've managed to make it work. You know, it's like you just kind of adjust and go with the flow. Luckily, all my clientele at this point, you know, you when you get that intimate with someone and they kind of open up their soul to you, you become friends. You know, it's like you it just happens. And so everybody understands that, you know, my family's number one always, you know, so if my daughter needs something or whatever, it's like, guys, give me 5. They're super cool with it. So it works out, you know, and I don't abuse that at all. You know, same thing. We had a 9-year-old puppy and she's a pain in the butt, but once in a while I got to kind of go up and take over for a second because my wife's on a meeting and she's like, get the dog, you know. So it can be pretty chaotic. So you learn to. It threw me off at first because it's like you got to get into that zone, you got to get into that creative mindset, and then it's if you get distracted from it, I've learned how to jump back in a little bit easier.
Yeah. So I was stalking you a little bit on Facebook, as I am apt to do.
You're doing research. Come on, that's research.
Yeah, I'll phrase it like that from now on.
Okay.
And you're recording a new album with Verve Pipe. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
How'd you first get involved with them?
Okay, so back in well, first and foremost, it all stems from my friendship with the old drummer Donnie Brown. Okay. Donnie's from Saginaw, and we had become friends in the late 90s, early 2000s, and just, you know, we're both huge Beatles fans, and we started writing songs together, and we just became pals. You know, it was just kind of like a musical brotherhood kind of thing. And you know, in about 2009, I started doing fill-in dates for them on bass and guitar, whatever, if like someone couldn't do the thing. So I'd done a couple tours, and then in 2010 they asked me to be a member for real. And it was no tryout or anything. It was just like, hey, you've done this gig, you know what you're doing, you want to be in the band. So, and it was funny because at the time I was like, I don't know. I was
going to ask you, was that a heck yeah, I'm doing it, or was it like, I don't know if this is my thing?
Well, I just quit the cover band to do the studio full time.
Okay.
So I'm just like, I just got out of playing live, you know. It's like,
yeah.
Excuse me. And I'm like, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot if I don't do this. So it was great. Gave me a chance to see the world with my best friend.
Yeah.
You know, it was more or less just at that point in time, we were working on the family music, the kids albums and stuff like that. So I understood my role as kind of like a hired gun kind of thing for the live shows.
Yeah.
So when my daughter was born in 2013, I kind of went, you know, I tried it for a few months, you know, and I'm like, I don't want to be gone. So I just said, hey guys, thanks for the opportunity. Loved it. a great friendship. I'm going to bow out now, and everybody was super cool with it. So
That's cool. How long was that? How long did you play with them?
about 4 years.
Okay.
Yep.
And you mentioned the kids' music. Explain that a little bit.
Well, at that point, Donnie and Brian, who were the two main forces, the singer and drummer, were realizing that Verve Pipe fans from the heyday were probably parents at this point. And they had an opportunity to do a kids song for like a Meyer compilation that was going out to sell in Meyer stores.
Yeah.
And are you glad I didn't say Myers? Sorry, I just
You can say whatever you want, man.
I know. It's just such a Bay City thing. We're getting into Bay City things here. Going to Myers. Anyway,
Use guys.
Yeah, use guys. Yeah. So they did the compilation, and then they had all these leftover songs. So they decided to make a record, which was really, really great because then we were being asked to these festivals because they had like a kids stage. So we're playing Lollapalooza. We're playing Austin City Limits Festival. We're playing Hangout Festival in Gulf Shores, Alabama.
All on a kids stage?
All on the kids stage.
I love it.
And then you get to hang for 2 days and then go watch the Foo Fighters and Paul Simon and all this, and the Eagles. And it's like...
That's got to be a completely different vibe to making music and playing music. Like I don't want to say more fun because
it was completely more fun.
It's got to be a blast.
Yeah, you go play like the hard rock stuff. You got to look all serious and cool, and then it's
look
like
how moody I am.
When in the kids stuff, it's just like, oh, I get to be myself and just like pretend to fart. My buddy was playing drums or whatever. Just like stuff.
Yeah, and just watching to see a kids just losing their brains over anything.
It's amazing. it's amazing. It was so much fun because it was so much more my speed. So I'm glad I was on it in the band during that.
Yeah,
leg.
that's a good time to jump in.
Yeah. So that worked out well. And then so I left, and then Donnie left at the same time, the drummer. Okay. So we still work together. And he's my session drummer, and we just have a great working relationship. So a couple years ago, Brian had reached out to me, and we had all stayed in contact, the other band members and myself, because become friends with people.
Right. It's not like a gross bad breakup, people.
Right. Yeah. And so Brian reached out to me to work on some solo music. He's like, hey, I love what you're doing. Do you want to work on some solo stuff? So I said, yeah, great. So he came over, we worked on about 4 or 5 songs, and then he kind of said, hey, these might be better, get more traction if they were Verve Pipe songs. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he's like, I'm thinking about making a Verve Pipe record with this. Do you want to record it and produce it? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, great. Now I get to see all my friends,
Yeah.
So we did a little writing retreat up north, pre-production thing for 7 days at a cabin near Cadillac, and got a bunch of song ideas down. And now they don't have they have a drummer, but he's pretty new. So we wanted to get someone who's had a lot of studios experience. So we hired Ken Coomer, who used to be in Wilco, the first drummer from Wilco.
Yeah.
So I'm starting in June. I'm going to Nashville for a few days to work with Ken on the drums.
Oh, very cool.
Bring the drums back, then we do the rest of the stuff. So yeah, it kind of just all, it's one of those things, and I think you can agree with this 100%. It's like you have to be, I don't want to say careful, because if you can just be yourself, if you're not a jerk,
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to meet people along your journey, and you just never know when that would turn into a thing. It's like, I didn't realize that until later, but it's like, thank God I wasn't like a conceited a-hole to these people.
Yeah.
But I was just always a fan. It's like I was a Verve Pipe fan. It's like in the late 90s, I paid to go see him at, I probably saw him 30 times before I was even in the band.
Mm.
And it's like, but you get a chance to interact with these people. You just, you find you have so many things in common. Your love for weird bands like XTC is one of my other favorite bands that I love, that Donnie loved. And so it's just, and my buddy, actually before, when I was at Ferris, can't think of where I was. Anyway, my buddy Jeff Hupp was playing in a band called the Atomic Numbers, which I absolutely loved. And we became friends that day, and we're talking 25 years ago. Mm. And he's making a movie in Detroit, and now he asked me to work on some of the music. So you know what I mean? So it's like, it's just, you never know. You never know.
You never know. Do you ever have to check yourself from swooning too hard? Because I mean, your job, like my brother builds guitars for like Dan Auerbach or Black Keys, hangs out with him, like Wilco and all these names, and it's hard not to swoon. Do you ever feel yourself like, oh, I'm fanboying a little bit too hard over this?
Well, I've come to the conclusion that there's no gray area. Either the artist is really, really cool and gets it, or just a complete like shut down. Really? And you can see it in their face, like when you start talking to them and they're like looking around for like a different conversation. But like a funny story was when we were doing that Austin City Limits Fest, Spoon was playing. Okay. And Spoon is like, I'm like, this is a fanboy moment. And Britt, the singer, we were in the...
No offense, but I could see you being a giant Spoon fanboy.
There you go. Yeah. So we were in the little artist area, and Britt Daniel, the singer, was just kind of standing by himself drinking a beer. And I'm like sitting there like, do I go talk to him? I'm like, it's like high school. Like, do I ask her out? Do I ask her out? What if she says no? What if she says no? So, but at that point I was so used to rejection, it didn't matter. So I walk over there and I said, hey, man, Britt, nice to meet you. I'm Andy. And I'm like, I got to say, you know, I'm a recording nerd, and you guys make some of the best sounding records. The drums are always on point. And he was like, oh, cool. Like, he's like, okay, this guy gets it. And then it was a half-hour conversation about just recording records we loved.
That's got to be such a thrill.
It was great. Yeah. But he made me feel like on the same level instantly.
Yeah, we're now peers.
Right. Yeah. And some people they will talk down to you, and they will, like I said, and at that point you're just like, I want to get out of this conversation too. You know. So
yeah, immediately you pick up the energy like, I'm not wanted here, and I don't want to be here either.
Yep. Fist bump. See you later.
See you, bro.
Yeah. So yeah, same thing in that same festival. I was like sitting down for breakfast by myself, and this tall, lanky dude sits next to me. He's like, can I sit here? Sure. It was Patrick from the Black Keys.
Awesome.
And we had breakfast together.
Awesome.
And he really needed a shower.
Funny, as long as we're talking about stories. So funny story about the Black Keys. When they were first starting, my brother was building for Huss and Dalton Instruments down in Virginia, and the Black Keys, they were playing a little show around there, and so my brother and his friend Smithers drove to the show, and they're at the show in the middle of the show, and my brother's phone, it keeps going off, and it's my mom. And she's like, well, I'm at a Black Keys show. I'm not going to pick up. But my mom keeps calling him. And he says, oh, this must be some kind of emergency. So he walks out of the show and answers the phone. And she's like, so the Virginia State Police are calling us, and they have your van. The van was still in my mom and dad's name. And they had driven this minivan to the show. And Matt was like, I don't really understand why they have the van, because I drove it here. Well, it turns out that while they were at the Black Keys show, somebody with a screwdriver had jacked their van, driven it away from the show, got into a car chase with the Virginia State Police, and he had dumped it in like a ditch by a river or something like that, with the screwdriver still jammed into the keyhole. And that was my brother's first Black Keys show.
That's an incredible. Well, I'm sure it was stressful at the time, but that's a
but it's
story.
worth it for the story.
It's a story. Yeah, you got to, we need those stories. But
yeah,
that's crazy.
Crazy.
I don't have anything that well. Excuse me. I did get my car did get broken into during a Fountains of Wayne show at the shelter in Detroit, but it was bad. So
you probably didn't find it until after you left the show.
No, it was actually before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What a downer.
I know, right? So I didn't get to stay the whole time. I was like, no, my windows are down, and I probably at this point, honestly, like at my age, I would probably say, okay, cool, I'll just leave it later. I'm insured. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
right.
when you're like 25 and you have no money, it's like, oh man, I gotta get the window fixed, and it's like,
yeah, you're obsessing over your window.
Yeah. Now it's like, it's a car. Who cares?
I'm too tired to be stressed out.
Once you have a child puke all over everything in your vehicle, it doesn't mean as much anymore.
All your physical possessions are disposable.
Right. Yeah. You learn.
Yeah. You keep bringing up the Beatles, like you have every mic from the Beatles, and you brought them up again. Talk to me about the Beatles, but from the perspective of a sound engineer, of a producer, because I, as a fan, I can say, oh, I love the Beatles, I love this song, but talk to me about what makes them so good from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, for a lot of us, it's like I don't want to say the Bible, but it's like it's the manual. Okay, they wrote the book, and not only like, you can approach it from Songcraft. If you just take away all the recordings, Songcraft, of course, they wrote some of the greatest songs of all time. And of course, that's debatable to some people, but it's really not a debate. So,
yeah, bring it, listeners.
Yeah. Okay, anti-Beatle people are the worst. I'm just saying, because they just do it to rattle people.
Yeah.
But
I hate the thing everybody likes.
Well, then the thing is, like, there's a way to approach it. It's just like, I always say, I don't say, oh, that stinks anymore. I say, you know what? That's just not for me. I understand.
Which is the most accurate response, I think. Because like, you could hate something that sounds like complete garbage and noise, but to somebody, it changed their life.
Yeah, like Dylan. I mean, Dylan's like a hit or miss guy. It's like, I respect the heck out of it. Do I listen to him a lot? Not really, but I still do once in a while.
Yep.
But anyway. So from a production standpoint, at that point in time, you're talking early 60s, there were a lot of rules, and you're talking 4-track tape. So it's very limited, meaning like when I say 4-track, that means like the vocals could go on one track, the bass would go on another, and sometimes they would record the band on and blend everything on the other 2 tracks kind of thing. So super, super limited resources. So that you have to kind of consider that as part of this thing.
Yeah.
So they got these engineers, and you're talking like, when they kind of got to Revolver, they had a 19-year-old kid named Jeff Emmerich kind of got thrown into the captain's chair to record the stuff. But at that time, they had a little bit of clout. So EMI had these rules, like this microphone has to be at least 4 feet from the bass drum.
Oh,
kind of
really?
Thing. Yeah. So they're like, well, it's the Beatles. They're not going to fire us if we move the mics in closer to the drum kit to make them sound more punchy and that kind of thing. So they started bending the rules a little bit, okay, and wiring like vocals through Leslie speakers and really getting creative in the studio. Up to that point, the studio is pretty much designed to capture the music performance by the band. They'd play it live, you record it, kind of thing. So then overdubbing and all that stuff was kind of like in its infancy. I mean, Les Paul and Mary Ford did a little bit of that, but that was considered like witchcraft at the time. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you can't do that. You can't perform that live.
Interesting.
So the Beatles started using the studio as an instrument. Same with Brian Wilson around that time. It's like let's use this in a way that we can only do this in the studio. And then you get records like Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour. All these rules are being broken, and the rule book goes out the window, and it's pretty cool. So you're talking art at its highest level.
Interesting, because immediately I'm thinking like Hendrix. Like, why is Hendrix such a big deal? Obviously, he could play, and he could play like nobody, but he really said, this is a guitar, and I'm going to use it in a way that nobody else has seen before.
Correct.
So technically, have there been better guitarists? Sure. But being the first person to really say, I'm going to take what you think this is, and I'm going to use it to create the sounds that I want is
that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
That's a great
You can
analogy.
steal it if you want.
Okay.
You mentioned Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys.
Yep.
And talk to me about them, because typically as a music listener, I'm thinking Beach Boys and it's fun,
surfing,
surf music, but you also have posted something in the past about just how good of a record they produce. Talk to me about them.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Jeez, this is you're asking all the fun questions.
That's what I do.
I know. You're just teeing them up for me, man. It's like so. Okay. So Brian Brian's musical mind, you kind of have to consider his kind of past too. He was a big Four Freshmen fan, and they were kind of like a jazz quartet vocal group. So really weird chord progressions, really not just your standard, 12-bar blues, which a lot of Chuck Berry at the time and stuff like that were doing. So he took a more sophisticated approach at rock and roll, essentially. You listen to those vocal arrangements and stuff like that. And so you're talking to 21-year-old kids writing all these parts. So there's something.
21, he was.
I mean, yeah, they were all super young.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to like Surfer Girl, there's a ridiculous key change in there, and it's like he was like, that was like the second song he wrote.
Really?
It's insane.
I have never heard the connection to like the vocal jazz part of it, but right now in my head I'm hearing all the Beach Boys music, and you can hear that vocal jazz influence, how all the vocals, like the arrangement is so tight
and precise.
It is so tight and so precise, and it is just like when it's dialed in, you're not hearing necessarily like that was wild. You're hearing the music, but you're hearing okay.
So, and I think when you in the grand scheme of things, when you think about like the Beatles and the Beach Boys and stuff, it's like they made these really, really sophisticated arrangements and songs sound so simple.
Yes.
That it just you just don't think about like, oh, that's a 9 chord or whatever.
You're just thinking about Surfer Girls, man.
Yeah, so it's like, when you think about like a great painting or any great piece of art, you can look at it from afar and go, man, that's great. And then when you look up close, you're like, oh, look at that detail. Oh, look at that line drawn. Oh, whatever. And it's like, so the layers of it. I think great art is layers. It's like you can look at it from a distance or hear it from a distance, and it moves you, and then you get in close. You're like, whoa, this is way bigger than I thought.
I love that you say that, because I used to be a music major. I was in the organ performance master's program at Central Michigan.
Wow,
yes,
nice.
I played the pipe organ. Everybody make fun of me at home.
No, I'm not making fun of you.
But what I loved is my music was firmly planted in the Baroque era. Like Johann Sebastian Bach, like he dies, the Baroque era ends. And what I loved about him and his music was you could do that. You could see that in a very evident form. You could take the right hand and measure 17, isolate it, and you could say that would sound amazing on the organ, on a violin, sung in any, you could flip it upside down, flip it backwards, in any sort of way. The perfection of this, the masterwork of this is that the each individual piece is amazing by itself, and then when you layer it on top of all of these other layers, you get this. But you could break it down and still have the same thing. There was no faking it. There's no covering it. Well, I'm just gonna slap 50,000 different lines on this, and it's gonna sound great here, but individually, it's not. But I love that you're really pointing out the difference between somebody who is a master and somebody who is not quite there yet, is that level of attention and deliberation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there are bands that make very sophisticated records that really technically are incredible, but you lose a big chunk of your audience. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. They're making the music they want to make. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you translate it to really cut into like the average everyday listener's soul, when you hear a song like God Only Knows, it's like you could play that for people who've never heard it before, and you could see their eyes water. You know what I mean? So it's like it's like I said, it's bridging that gap between like making something sound like very relatable, simple, melodic, something that really gets in there, but then you can color it with all the beautiful stuff around it to make it complex. So that's Brian in a nutshell to me, so when he made pets, they did have the fun car songs early on, and at that point, it's like, hey, write another hit, hit. So he's at that point, I think he's just kind of learning his craft. You know what I mean? And he's developing, and then when it came to Pet Sounds, he's like, this is what I want to do. And then you got Wouldn't It Be Nice, Sloop John B, and all those songs on Pet Sounds, and that's when the genius level was like thrown out there, So
do you think he gets enough credit?
For the people that know, I think, yeah, for sure. I think the average everyday Beach Boy fan, because a lot of them are, like my parents' age kind of thing. They were kids when that stuff came out, and they still like the surfing songs and stuff like that. So I think in like the music community, people know Brian was like kind of the main guy, and I think in just average everyday listener might not know as much, but it's I don't think it's I don't think that, like I said, I don't think that's another right or wrong, even though I despise Mike Love as a human being. So
it's so sad we have to give those qualifiers.
We don't want to get into that side of it, because then I'll sound like a grouchy old dude. But anyway, I just think that I give Mike Love credit. Some people will just like say Mike Love, whatever, boom, he's a waste. But if Mike wouldn't have made those like, hey, catchy boy girl surfing songs, car songs, then Brian might not have gotten the vehicle to make the music he wanted to make. Without Mike, we wouldn't get Brian at his peak, So you got to take it for what it is.
That's true. Do you have producers, sound engineers who you're like, this is the person. This is the person I want to model. I've modeled myself, or has been kind of the primary inspiration for what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think it's like with anything. I think you develop, like, you have favorites at times, and then you slowly develop into your hodgepodge soup of influences. So there are tons. Like, and the crazy thing is like getting into this community of recording engineers and going into summits. Like, I've been able to like become friends with some of my heroes, which is like insane. Like, we were talking about the Weezer Blue album, like my friend Chris Shaw engineered that record.
Ooh.
So it's like I get to ask him about, hey, what was Rivers doing on that thing? And he'll be like, oh, that was a blah 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 blah, and he'll just tell me.
Wild.
And it's crazy. So that part still kind of freaks me out once in a while. But anyway, I think like, modern producers, there's a few, Dave Cobb, who does a lot of like the Brandy Carlisle, Jason Isbell kind of records. He
Did you go to the Jason Isbell show in Saginaw?
I did not. I was recovering from neck surgery at the time. I had a ticket.
Did you really?
Yeah, I didn't go. I was in a neck brace and no condition to go anywhere.
You could have made it work.
I know I could have, but I've seen Jason a few times.
Have you?
Yeah, he's amazing song. Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. I love Jack Antonoff from Bleachers.
Oh,
he does, Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey, and he's kind of and both of those guys are like making modern records with old school approaches.
Yes,
and I think that's kind of like where my soul lives.
Yeah.
And as far as engineers, Ryan Freeland, he's done Amy Mann records. This guy, I don't know how Ryan does it. And there's something about like, we're living in this Dolby Atmos world. He will make a regular stereo track sound like Atmos. Like, you feel like you're in the room. He's done Ray LaMontagne and stuff like that. But he has this uncanny ability to take a group of a band and make it sound like you're in the middle of the band.
Ugh.
It's unbelievable. And it's just like, he's a master. So yeah, there are a few. And of course, going back to like the George Martin, who produced the Beatles, and the Brian Wilson, and Jeff Emmerich as an engineer, Ken Scott as an engineer. Ken Scott did a lot of the Bowie stuff that I love. So there are a lot.
Yeah.
It comes from all over, and if I can steal one little bit from like Vance Powell, he's great too. He's done Raconteurs, Jack White, Chris Stapleton, it's like, I love the way his acoustic guitars sound. So, okay, I'm going to try to figure out how he does his acoustic guitars. And then I'm going to throw that into my thing. So you just kind of like, you get your inspiration from different things. And then that collectively creates your thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think as an artist, that's pretty much what it comes from.
That makes more sense, I think, to define a person or people or a band or whatever it is as an inspiration, that it is really kind of you become aware of somebody at one point and they influence you for a bit, and then you become aware of somebody else and they influence you in a different way, and then as the years go by, and if you keep doing the work, you end up with kind of this collaborative inspirational pool, and now you can really start saying, oh, this is the Andy Reid sound, or this is the Phil sound, or something like that. Yeah.
I think that's it. And I think that if you look at if you went and asked every artist, you know, who their main, and they list 4 or 5 people, and then you think, okay, that's where they're getting that. And it would be, and I don't want to use, but if you're taking influence from like one band or artists, then you're just going to be a copycat.
Yep. It's iterative. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, but not saying there's anything wrong with that either. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just like, that's just like, well, if you're going to sound like the Beatles, I'd rather just listen to the Beatles, you know, that kind of thing. So that's just where I'm at with it. But I feel like the artists that really bring in as much information as they can and inspiration from different elements, they're going to have the most unique thing going on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see. And as you learn the history of music and all these different things, because I have to kind of study. So like if I meet a new client and they said, I really like this Lucinda Williams record. It's like, okay, I haven't heard that. I'm going to go listen to it. Wow, that's really good. Okay, so now I know where they're coming from with the Lucinda thing. Okay, they like Wilco. Okay, I'm going to listen to a couple Wilco. And it's like, so I'm studying, and then if I can help them create their sonic identity by borrowing little bits from these things, they're going to be so happy. No, and that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? It's like, so
especially when people come in and they're like, I want this sound. You want to be able to give that to them. It's different from somebody coming in and saying, I don't really know, or like, it's up to you. But if somebody comes in and said, like, I want my guitar track to sound like this off this record, you kind of owe it to them to say, okay, let's try to get it.
Yeah, it actually helps me immensely. You know what I mean? Because when they do come in and they don't know what they want, I have to figure it out. Like, I still want to listen to their song, listen to their voice, and see what's okay. They're pulling from here,
and they still do have preferences too, even though they don't know that they do, or they don't
exactly.
And so you come out with something, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't really like that," which is great because it's a clue as to what they do like. But at the same time, now you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what they want and what they don't want, as opposed to just, I want to sound like this.
Right, and then when you find that lane that they want to go in, then it's on. You know what I mean? It's like then the connection's made. Let's go.
Yep.
And that's fun, So it's like, it is kind of figuring out a puzzle piece, because a lot of people that do come in just come in with like an acoustic guitar and a vocal.
Yep.
And then I have to like play the drums, guitars, keys, whatever, bass. And so I don't want to just say, okay, I'm going to do the Beatles thing on everything, because if that case, I would do that, but I don't want to do that. So I kind of just have to listen to where they're coming from. It's like, okay, there's a little country-ish tinge in this song, but it's still kind of like a flowery thing, whatever. And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna dig into some, Joni Mitchell, and I'm gonna dig into some, whatever, and I think being a fan of music first has helped me so much, because I love those little moments of having to figure out something, and I learn from them. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's another tool in the box kind of thing.
Such a great encouragement, I think, to artists of any kind, whether you're a painter, photographer, audio engineer, producer, musician, whatever it is that a lot of times in our quest to create our own art, we forget to study art. Or in our quest to write our next great novel, we forget to read great novels, because we get so consumed with doing the work and trying to hone our craft and our skill and things like that, when the world is flush with amazing artists who can be not only inspirational, but if you break it down and you look and see how did they create this? What was the process like? What did they use? What environment did they put themselves in? How many different drafts did they go? All of those things, I think, are keys to unlocking really the potential to our own art, and we hamper ourselves when we're spending all our time reading instead of half our time writing, or all of our time playing music and trying to write music, when listening to music can get us there even faster.
Yeah, it's you got to discipline yourself, and it's almost like I call it reconnecting. You know, it's like, so I'll get bogged down a lot with work, and especially lately because I had to do a lot of makeup stuff because I was down about a month in February.
Yeah, you had strep throat or something.
No, I had strep throat 2 weeks ago. No, I had neck surgery in January.
Oh,
so
that's when
it's been a year. Anyway, so yeah, I'm behind on that too. But anyway, so it's like, so you get consumed with doing your tasks and stuff like that, and then one night I just said, forget it. I'm just gonna grab 4 records and put my headphones on and just chill. And it's just like that connection, you just reconnect, and the whole reason I got into this thing anyway was because I loved music. And because it did something to me that nothing else had. So, and to your point too, with the learning the craft a little bit, it's the resources now are amazing. Like, we didn't have YouTube when I started. Right. I had to figure it out and read books and all that stuff from the library, all that stuff. Like, that's how I had to learn. But like now it's like, you want to know how many takes something has, what microphone they use, what this, what that, what, you know, it's all there. It's out there.
There's some kind of behind the scenes with the audio engineer, and he's walking you through for the next 45 minutes of everything that he did.
I'm super jealous of people starting now, because it took me like 7 years to do like 1 month of YouTube research would have done. But I'm kind of glad I did it that way, because you learn from your mistakes, you know? So it is what it is. I was slower because I didn't really take on another artist. Like, I probably recorded myself for about 5 years before I even considered recording someone else. Because I would have felt guilty taking someone's money when I really wasn't that confident in what I was doing. You know what I mean? So that learning, you know, on my own music, making demos and stuff like that, I'm glad I was, you know, like, that was my vehicle, so I didn't have to make my mistakes on someone else's dollar.
Up somebody else's music. Things get
not
bad
saying
really
I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen as often.
Yeah. Are you a Rick Rubin fan?
I am, you know.
Did you read his new book?
I did.
What did you think about his new book?
Well, okay, mixed feelings. So
I also have mixed feelings.
I'm an audiobook person.
Are you?
You know, and you know his Broken Records podcast. I don't know, have you ever listened to that? Okay, so he has a podcast too. So a lot of the stuff that he's saying in his book is kind of like, it got a little too Yoda-ish for me after like a couple chapters. I kind of knew where he was coming from. I absolutely love the series he did with McCartney on Hulu, where they pulled up those Beatles tracks and stuff like that. So I'm a fan of Rick Rubin. He's definitely more of the hands-off type producer. Like, he hires a really good engineer to handle that side of things, and then he works with the band, and he's more about just like the vibe in the room and setting. A lot of what a producer does is they kind of just set the table. Okay. And then you invite the right guests, and then a dinner party occurs. Like, he's like a table setter type producer. I'm gonna get all these pieces together, and I want to see what happens. You know, and I think that's kind of his. I think that's kind of his thing.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way, and I told my brother that too. I'm about halfway through, and I kind of felt that, like, there are parts that kind of stick in my brain as things that I have to remind myself as far as creative work goes, but it did lean really, really hard into the kind of Yoda approach to the creative act, and it, awesome for some people. I'm kind of 1 foot in that world, but then also the other foot in, like, give me something practical, give me something hard, give me something I can practice or do every single day. Like, I want a little bit of both, and he leans pretty hard into the, like, everything is a creative. This table is a creative opportunity. Which could be good. Maybe I'm just not there yet.
I think with the caliber of artists he gets to work with, I think that's refreshing for them. You know, like when you think about the Avett brothers, and there's technically very sound, and they've done things a certain way, and then you have this guy come in and just kind of change the game for them. I bet you that's super refreshing for them.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So I think he's like the producer, and you know, look at his work with, you know, Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff like that. Like, he definitely creates an atmosphere. I think Lanois is kind of the same way. Daniel Lanois, kind of like more of a vibe guy.
Which kind of makes sense considering the people that he's working with. I mean, they show up already world class musicians.
They don't need a lot of editing.
Yeah, they don't need to. He doesn't need to tell Flea how to play the bass better,
Right?
Like that, because he's not going to. And to Rick's own admission, he doesn't know anything about music, so he couldn't tell Flea how to play the bass better. But here he is. I love your analogy of setting the table, because if the table isn't set right, or if the party atmosphere is bad, it's really hard to have a great party or have a great dinner if all those things are falling apart. But setting that up and creating the framework can make some magic later on.
Yeah, that's his thing, and it's obviously worked for him.
Yeah.
He's doing pretty good.
Yeah, I have beard envy.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a good beard. Yeah. I have this envy because some people say he takes naps during sessions. I envy that.
I want to take naps during sessions.
I'm like, oh, you're really gonna work on this guitar part for 2 hours? Anyway, no.
Okay, everybody listening at home, Andy and I are about to take a 5-minute rest.
Yes. But he's great, and then, he's another one that I admire his approach. It's definitely, I come from a more technical approach, but I definitely feel like he and he'll even say it himself. He creates the energy. He rides that line.
Okay.
And he's got a great studio in the LA area. That's just a beautiful. Kind of, I think it's on the water. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, it just looks like a comfortable place to hang, So
okay,
I think that's his approach.
We're gonna play, put Andy in a corner by playing the top 3 game. So top 3 records of all time.
Oh.
Then top 3 Michigan bands of all time. Then top 3 local artists that you may or may not have recorded, that people should be listening to. Oh. I could take away the word top if you want.
My favorite?
Yes.
My favorite. Okay.
Yeah, your favorite.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Or your current favorite, or things that you love.
I know my brain is just like in scramble mode. Okay, so obviously bands. I'll go Beatles, Beach Boys. I'm gonna go 4. Elliott Smith and Brendan Benson.
Oh yeah, you just posted like an Elliott Smith album, didn't you?
So the Elliott and Brendan are kind of like my 2 favorite modern songwriter recording artists.
Yeah.
Not that Elliott's with us anymore, but and then the Beatles, Beach Boys are kind of like my home base for the whole thing. So
you sorry to hijack this, but
okay.
Like you mentioned that an Elliott Smith album being transformative for your life. It really changed your life. What album was it, and how did it change you?
XO was the record. And, at that time, I was still finding myself as like a singer-songwriter, and Elliott had this great way of, he was almost like a little bit Lennon, a little bit McCartney,
Yeah.
Like he kind of found this middle ground there. He was an amazing musician, but he also had that vulnerability of like a Lennon. Lennon kind of opened up his soul, a little bit more than Paul did, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Elliott was kind of like, and he was very shy. He wasn't very outgoing. It's like I really related to him, at the time, and he was alive at the time. So that it kind of just hit me at the right time, kind of thing, you know. And then you just look at his catalog, and it's just filled with amazing songs, and some of them, can punch you in the face with just his vocal and an acoustic, and then he has songs that have lots of orchestration and all different things in that, and that still resonated with me. So both his like kind of things really connected. The
person plus the music.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that with him and Brendan. I became a fan of Brendan even before we worked together. And then, the funny thing about him was we had finished our record. This is the first record I had ever made, okay?
Ooh.
We had the finished mixes. He gave us a CD of it because that's how it went back then. And then he's like, hey, guys, I finished my new album, and, I'm still shopping it out to labels. Do you guys want a copy of it? And this was the album Lapelco. And I'm like, because he already played me some songs. So I was like, yeah, I want it. Yeah. No. So my brother and I are driving home. We have our first finished CD. Our CD never touched the CD player because we were listening to Brendan's record over and over and over again,
Awesome.
So I've been a fan of Brendan since day one, and he still makes great records.
What record do you think you have listened to the longest consecutively
Probably Lapalco.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the
yeah,
one?
Yeah, it's great. And he was making that at the time we were making a record. So I was hearing snippets of it. So I'm really close to it. You know, we were recording at the same time, and he was showing us like different songs from it. I'm like, and it's also that realization. It's like, you can take it how you want. You know, it's like I had a lot of like confidence then, and then I hear a record like that, and it's like, okay, I have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But I took it the right way. It's like, I'm not saying I'm horrible now, but it's like, but I want to be where Brendan is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a little shock to
right.
like showing you what is possible, where you're at and where you want to be, and the distance between those two.
And you can either take it at like, oh, whatever, I'm great, our record's just as good kind of thing. And I took it as like, okay, our record's good, but man, this is superior in a way, and I want to figure out why.
Yeah. When I had my audition for Central, on the way I was going to school in Minnesota. It's about a 13-hour drive to Mount Pleasant from there.
Wow.
I listened to Sufjan Stevens' Illinois and Michigan albums entire way there. And then I only listened to Bon Iver, For Emma, Forever Ago the entire way back.
That's nuts. And those are great road trip records.
I just, like, there was something about, like, Sufjan, what he was doing then, that it connected with the classical music part of my brain. Everything's layered, and the instrumentation and the direction he was going. I had never really heard anything like that. Like, here's pop music, yes, but here's storytelling, yes. This kind of really weird concept of like the 50 state things that he's not actually doing. But that really blew my mind. And then like For Emma had come out, I want to say probably like a year or two before then. And there was just something about the space in For Emma, Forever Ago that I loved, the cohesiveness that you could really feel. This is intended to be listened to in this way from track one to the end. And for me, that's such a defining factor of a great record, that it's not just I listen to track 7 and track 3. It's I can almost not help myself listening to this entire thing. Or when you do listen to a track, you feel like it's missing something because you didn't start at 1 and you didn't end at 10. You're like you missed, or you watched minute 13 to 17 of the movie. Like, okay,
right.
Yeah, I get that's a funny scene, but you're missing the movie. Pete Yorn's Life on a Chain, I remember listening to the first couple times thinking like, this album is such garbage. I hate this album. I hate Pete Yorn. I hate this. And then as I listened to it more, I was just like, okay, I get it. Like, I get this is Pete Yorn's thing. I get this song. And like, I think about those records just being just like they touched my brain in a different way.
Yeah, and I think that whole conversation too can be talked about is like making singles versus making an album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, so thankfully most of the people that I work with want to make like an album. So we're thinking about like the grand scheme.
I was just going to ask you if you're more of a single or album guy,
I'm an
but
album guy.
that's kind of an obvious question.
Yeah. But I mean, I love me some 70s AM hits though. You know what I mean? So it's
true.
Yeah. So, but I like making records, you know, I like making complete albums. So yeah, the second one was favorite
Michigan
bands. Okay, of all time kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna go, well, I guess Raconteurs would count. White Stripes, Raconteurs.
Yeah.
I'm gonna lump that together.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm cheating.
Yeah, you can cheat.
So okay. So yeah, I'll say the Verve Pipe too, because they were such a huge band for me as a fan. You know, even without my involvement in it, I would say for sure the Verve Pipe.
Cool.
They just released Villains on vinyl, and I got to kind of help oversee the mastering process. So I got like the test pressings and stuff. I'm like, this is weird. I'm like, I'm sitting here with this record that like I loved, and I have to approve it.
Yeah,
for
why?
Yeah, it was just funny.
I'm not worthy.
I know, it's just, and I do kind of slap myself once in a while with that kind of stuff. But in the end, it's like they're just normal dudes. Okay, so the third one, man, you know, I love Motown. I love so many projects, but when it comes to Motown, I definitely feel like I'm more of a singles person. But that was their that was their thing. You know, they weren't trying to make records; they were trying to make hit records that were just one-offs. So, third band, I'm gonna go with the Atomic Numbers. They were a Detroit-based band in the late '90s, early 2000s that just they had an amazing live show. I ended up being in a band with two of the members after called the Rioteers, but I really love the Atomic Numbers. They really made me want to be in a rock band. You know, seeing them live, they had a little bit of Cheap Trick, they had a little bit of Beatles, they were like power pop, but they had amazing 3-part harmonies and stuff like that, and their show was explosive. So I would say those three bands. Yep.
And then finally, hyper local or artists that you've recorded with that everybody should listen to.
Oh man, I'm gonna leave someone out here, but
I'm gonna give a disclaimer for you,
Okay.
Andy. I'm putting Andy in a very difficult position here. He wants to talk about everybody because all of you are very good, but I'm forcing him to talk about only some of you. So it's not that he hates you; he loves all of you. Send me the hate messages.
Okay, perfect.
I'm just saying, give me 3 people that I should listen to, Andy.
Okay, so first and foremost, and this isn't a real secret, an artist named Amy Petty. She lives in Saginaw. She's from the Detroit area. We made a record together called "The Darkness of Birds," and she's just a world class vocalist. Like she's up there with she can sing. You know, she could sing next to Adele kind of thing. You know, when I think of like powerhouse singers kind of thing. But she also writes these amazing dark songs, and she's a great acoustic player, and we made a really awesome record that I'm super proud of. You know, she's super proud of. So I would say Amy Petty is one to check out, absolutely, first and foremost. Number 2, it's so hard. I work with a guy named Ron Selly Roscoe, and he doesn't really do one thing. He likes to collaborate. He's made like kind of funk records, blues records. He's made records where he has had guest vocalists on. And he always comes up with projects that are just like, he changes his game, you know, and he'll write songs for specific things. And I think it's really incredible what he's doing because he's really bringing a lot of our music community together too. Like he'll have Larry McRae come and sing on a song, and then he'll have people like Amy come in and play, Mike Robertson, all these different people that are really great musicians that are kind of part of the Reed recording family kind of thing. And he's just like, well, I need this for this song. He's like, so I'm going to hire the best, you know, darn folk singer I know. So he does that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and he has a thing called the 4 Collective. And the last record he made, Americana Motel, was really good, and it holds up to like the Nashville Americana records that I've listened to.
Suck it, Nashville.
That's exactly. Yeah. I have a lot of friends in Nashville, so I got to be nice.
Yeah, no offense, Nashville.
No,
we love
Nashville,
you.
but you ain't got nothing on Bay City.
Yeah.
So yeah, where Nashville has like 5,000 studios, and Bay City has 1.
That's fine. You got a monopoly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay, number 3. Oh man, I'm scrambling. I'll leave it at those 2 if I can get out on that one.
You can leave it at those 2.
Okay, yeah, because I think like I said, there's so many that are just,
so good.
Yeah.
So many
and I've really connected with a lot of them musically, and that's the hard part too. It's like when you are a music fan, and you know, I'll listen to an indie band from Minnesota that has 100 followers and love the record and not care if they're, you know, working at Starbucks or whatever. It's like the record still connects with me.
Yeah.
So my thing is like, I try to find when I'm trying to find out what the artist is trying to portray, and they let me in, and then I connect instantly. You know, it's like you got to love what you're working on. If not, you're just taking it for the paycheck too. So I really connect in a lot of ways, and there are you know what? I am gonna go number 3 because it's a young band from Colorado called Hollowhead, and it's 2 kids from the Midland area. They moved out to Colorado, and they're like this blend of Phoebe Bridgers, Soundgarden, really, really eclectic. And making that record was stupid fun because it was like there were no rules. And like I said, they were, for kids in their 20s, they were really, really receptive and open-minded and really wanted to get weird with it, where I feel like kids younger are like, I really want this. They really, they're really, they hold it close to them, but they were really open about all that stuff. And
that's cool.
We had a blast.
Yeah. Here's our music. Let's mess with it.
Yeah, they got it. They dove in head first. When it's like it usually takes artists a few years to really let themselves open up like that.
Yeah.
And we're gonna actually go. I'm actually going to Colorado. They rented an Airbnb like in the mountains. I'm gonna drive down there with all my gear, and we're gonna make a record this August. So that's gonna be fun.
Do you do a lot of the traveling for recording?
I do.
You do?
Yeah, and that's when it comes into play about the small studio. It's like, so if my resources are too little for the project, I have a mobile rig where I can go. We can rent a space, we could rent a church, we can rent a theater, whatever, and then I can come to them. So that opens up possibilities too of not having to have like one big room. It's like, well, we can pick any room,
true,
that kind of thing. So I really love doing that because it gets me out of the basement. It kind of gives me more challenges.
Yeah,
you walk into a room you've never heard or recorded before, and you got to figure out how to make it sound.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's super fun.
Kind of spikes your brain in a little bit different way, especially going to Colorado in a place you've never been to, in a space you've never experienced before, and they're there too. I mean, it just gives you a little bit different energy.
Oh yeah, super inspiring. Super inspiring. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and so it. Like I said, having the technology to do a mobile thing and knowing that I'm going to get the same quality that I'm going to get if I was in my actual studio, that's important because the technology wasn't there for a long time. I'd go record something remotely and bring it back. I'm like, man, it would have sounded better if I didn't hear, and that I don't have that issue anymore, which is super. That's great. So
yeah. You really, I knew of you and I knew of the work that you were doing. I didn't really start following you very closely until the record you did with Cora Nixon.
Oh, Cora's amazing.
Isn't she amazing?
She's amazing.
I had seen, because I didn't really know her either. And then I had seen like she was plugging the album or something like that, and I was typically not interested. Like I just see so much coming across my feed, and I clicked on it, and I'm like, oh, I like this a lot. And I typically don't listen to records over and over again, but I want to say for the next 3 days or something, I was playing something from that record.
Yeah, I mean that's her project. It's very minimalist.
Yeah.
And it didn't need a lot. It didn't need a lot because, I mean, you want to talk about an artist who really just lets it all out and puts it all out on the table. She did that, which was super impressive. So her piano playing and her voice, we started with that. And then a lot of the songs were just like, it doesn't need anything else.
Yeah, you just put a little salt and pepper here.
I feel exactly what you're going for. Yeah. Let's just leave that alone. And then we just kind of took some liberties with a couple other moments where it's like, okay, we could probably, because making an entire record with just like one instrument and one vocal, by track 5, some people can kind of get like, okay, here's another piano vocal song. And not that there's anything wrong with that either, but Cora definitely wanted to make like the scene change from song to song. So we did little bits here and there just to make them slightly different, but it still feels like a woman and her piano.
Yep.
And her songs.
And I walked away with so much respect for you as a producer, as an engineer, because of that. Because listening through it, I was thinking a lesser producer would have tried to do too much with this, because she does have a lot of space in the music, and it'd be really easy temptation to fall into, be like, well, we're gonna fill this out with this, and I've got this wacky sound bed of effects and stuff I just bought on Ableton, and like let's layer it in here, and like laser sounds and all of this stuff, and let's do a forever go thing, and like play strings with a buzzsaw or whatever, and it ends up being not good
It's not as intimate, for sure.
And so you just left it alone. You let it breathe. You said, these songs are rad. Let's do the scene changes, but we're going to back off.
Yep. And I think Cora and I had talked a lot about that beforehand, and she's a big Billie Eilish fan too. And I was getting into Billie Eilish at the same time because my daughter liked it. And then I was like, oh man, this is really good, and there's a lot of there's a lot of an approach to some of their Billy and Phineas's tracks that are very simple, and Billy's voice just carries it.
So talk to me about that, because on the outside, 99% of the population is like, yeah, Billie Eilish. She's a superstar, man. She had that one song, that one, and everybody's like, yeah, she's a pop singer. But then, like with Billy and Phineas, it was very apparent from the beginning, if you were at least in the scene a little bit, that the production side of it was just so brilliant. Talk to me about what makes those two so good.
I think they fill each other's gaps, kind of thing. Like, I think that, and they understand that, and they're close because they're brother and sister. Mm-hmm. I think that when they write songs, think about how hard that would be to write a song with your sibling.
Impossible.
Right. And I tried to do it too. Yeah. And it's
imagine.
I know it's tricky. So you can tell that they're best friends. You can tell that they lean on each other in the best ways. And Phineas's technical skill is there to support what Billy's trying to, and he respects his younger sister's vision. Yep. Tell me an older brother that would do that, Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's more personality driven than it even is technical, ability driven. I think when you have the right mindset and you go into it together like that, it's they have a special thing. I really think it's special. I think that that's a collaboration that's only going to get stronger as time progresses. And Phineas comes up with, I call a lot of what he does sound design. Mm-hmm. So he'll take a sound and he'll make a new unique sound out of that, because he just has an Apple, he just uses a laptop and one mic. That whole record's just wow. So he's creative in the best way. So I think there's a lot of that's just a musical relationship that when some people work with a new producer, it takes them a couple records to really find that home sweet spot when they've let each other in enough to go to the place where it's hard to go to. Yep. And those two have that right away. Yep. I think that's the thing.
This past Saturday when we recorded this episode was Record Store Day. Here's the definitive question. Record or vinyl versus digital?
Oh.
Which one wins?
Oh man, they both have their merits. They really do. I used to be a vinyl snob.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Analog sounds better. Blah 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 blah. All that stuff. Man, you think about the mediums we listen on. Like cell phones, earbuds, and stuff like that. A good record will translate across all mediums. A good song. Think about how. Our parents listened to AM radio with the crappy speakers.
It's true.
And they were still feeling that music. They were still feeling the song, right? So you can say all you want about having the speaker systems, crackling of the vinyl versus an MP3. Obviously digital can get to a point where it's harsh and unlistenable.
Yeah, right.
But so can a dirty needle on a record player.
And you're saying that harsh, unlistenable sound has more to do with the production of it than it does the medium of it.
Right, yeah. So it's when you find a record that can translate across all mediums, that's pretty cool. And music is getting back to a safe zone. It used to be what they call the loudness wars, where people were trying to make the record louder. And when that happens, things get harsher and more aggressive. And to some of us that listen to a lot of older music, it really is unattractive to the ears. You know what I mean? So they were cutting out a lot of listeners in that regard. So things started to back off, thankfully, because I was never a fan of that, because I'd get people like, can you make my record louder? I'm like, oh, we're going to destroy the dynamics.
Yeah.
Okay, so what if I hit this button that does nothing? Is that better?
Oh, yeah, that's way better. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want.
This fader here that I have assigned to 0. Yeah. No, but I mean, it was tough because, I am a fan of all that stuff. So it's like, I want to make the record as loud as I possibly can, but without screwing up the music part. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we're back to that. So I think that's a great thing. So I think that the records coming out now, they're really, and now that vinyl has become a thing again, they have to take into consideration that they want it to sound good in that format too. So this resurgence of vinyl is a beautiful thing for people like me who want to make great sounding records without destroying them to make them sound louder on Spotify.
Yeah.
And even like Spotify has like their sound check and stuff like that too. So when I finish a record, I have to kind of get it into this loudness sweet spot so it sounds good on YouTube, Spotify, CD, vinyl, blah, blah. I have all these other things. So I have to find that spot in the middle where it's going to sound good on all those things. So it's a pain in the butt to do, but in the end, it's really helping me out because when people listen on different formats, it's consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because you pull something up on Spotify and it's too loud, or you pull something on vinyl and it's too soft.
Right. Yeah, or too noisy. Yeah. Consistency is everything. So as much of a hindrance that all of that is, it's kind of a blessing in disguise because we're kind of trying to find this I don't want to say lowest common denominator, but this common ground between all the music formats, because there's no one. Spotify has their thing, Tidal has their thing, YouTube has their parameters, but there really is a line in the middle of all those things that if we can find that line or get close to it even, without going over, it's pretty safe.
What do you love about music the most?
Oh man. Geez. I think when it connects to you, when I hear a song for the first time and I'm like, wow, like that feeling I get when I'm trying to think of the last one. Mike Viola, who's an artist in, Los Angeles, and he's actually come and played in Bay City with me.
Cool.
He's great. He's a producer. He kind of does what I do in LA with like bands like Mandy Moore. He produces Mandy, and he did the last Panic at the Disco record. So he does he's a high profile guy, but he's also an amazing singer songwriter. And he had this song called he wrote with the guy from Panic at the Disco called "Don't Let the Light Go Out." And I know Mike, and I know his story. He lost his first wife to cancer when he was in his 20s. And it's about that. Like he lost a loved one. It's called "Don't Let the Light Go Out." And I just listened to it for the first time. And the Brendan, the guy that sings for Panic at the Disco, is just belting. And it's just like hitting every single nerve that I have. And that moment's pretty special. And I repeat. And the last time that happened before that was "The Joke" by Brandy Carlisle. And that was another song that just like floored me at the time, just talking about people that, are afraid to come out of their shell because there are these hateful people in the world, and I'm trying to raise a daughter to be, don't worry about these people. They're jerks. It's like, and it came at the time when, like I said, that's the part that gets me. It has nothing to do with what I play or record or anything. It's still that me finding a song or an album that's just like, because when this is all said and done and I'm done working, I'm still going to have these records to listen to, and that's going to be fun. So.
Well, I'm so glad that I have found you.
Oh,
Andy Reid.
I love the podcast. I've been listening to it since day one.
Oh, you're a fan.
I'm a fan. I know.
I love to hear it.
Well, that's what we want. No, you're doing. Well, I mean, it's just like I feel like this city is another city that's almost kind of coming out of its shell a little bit too. It's like this even just this downtown area was not like this 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was not remotely close. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm kind of like glad I'm kind of a small part of it. You know what I mean? So it's we're trending the right way.
Yeah,
100%.
I would agree with you that we're kind of in this situation of figuring out who we are and who we want to be, and you're a part of that. So.
I appreciate. I'm glad to be a part of it. You know, and it's another one of those things that you just don't realize you're doing until you kind of step back and take, you know, and then you realize that, like, oh, the concerts at the park. Okay, I've recorded 5 of those bands or whatever. You know, it's like it's pretty cool. Yeah, and then you see them gain new fans, and there's a great sense of pride. You know, it's like I actually made these shirts. That it's a funny, weird thing within the music community. It's like, well, to name drop Nashville. Okay, like, oh, I made this record in Nashville. Oh, I wrote this song in Nashville. It's like, you know, that's the cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody suggested you should make Bay City recording artist shirts. So I made these shirts that says Bay City recording artist, and people wanted them. They wear them.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm proud that I don't record in Nashville and I record in my hometown.
Heck yeah.
And I love that. That's kind of cool, you know, because it's not the cool thing to do, but they're still wearing it like a badge of honor.
Heck
you know
yeah.
what I mean? And that made me feel pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, you are pretty cool, Andy Reid. If people want to connect with you, how do they do that?
Just through the website, reedrecordingcompany.com. My email's up there. Shoot me a line. I have I'm also into really helping the newer generation with recording, so I have a lot of people job shadow. So if this sounds like something that you're getting into and you want to come hang out and just watch how it goes for a few days, shoot me an email. I do a lot of that stuff, and it's like I had a lot of people help me, so it's like you got to kind of, you know,
spread the love.
Yep, spread the love. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andy Reid, for being on the show. You are a delightful person. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.